Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and today we are starting part 4 of our 2Ts by AMT build. And as you can see, we've got a hot rod, which is definitely starting to take shape. And of course, we have our classic Model T, and this is going to be a pickup truck. And of course, you can tell that this is Dan's Model Works by the absolutely filthy, messy workbench, and because things are going wrong. Something which I did not notice until I was just wrapping up part 3, because as you may recall, I had just finally put the wheels on the cars, only temporarily. They're not glued on and can be removed at any time. But it wasn't until I had mocked up the bodies to do my closing shot that I noticed that there was something seriously wrong with the classic T, and I will give you a close-up shot to show you what is wrong. So here you go. Here is a straight-on view of the side of the car. And the front wheels aren't too bad in the way they're positioned. But Houston, we have a problem. There is probably maybe 1 scale inch between the wheel and the fender there. And I'm pretty sure it's not me who screwed up, because if we take the body off, there's only one place you can locate the axle. It goes right underneath the cross member, and that's where it is. And as well, the front axle can only be mounted in that one position as well. So, how do I fix the problem? So my first thought is can I move the body forward on the chassis? So what I did, flip this over and focus. You can see that I have filed a little bit of a channel right in there so that the whole body can move forward a bit. And I think this is required anyway, mainly because the front wheels were a little bit forward. Now that achieved maybe a 3 or 4 millimeter move forward. Still not enough for the rear wheels, and I'll show you how it looks with it shoved forward. So here's how the body sits with it shoved forward about 3 millimeters to take advantage of the gap that I filed in the floor pan there. And as you can see, we've opened up a little bit of space here, and the front wheels I think definitely look better, but those back wheels are still way too forward. I think we need to get them moved back at least 5 millimeters, call it 1/4 of an inch, something like that. So how do I achieve this? There's 2 ways to go. I can either take the body and cut it across, remove a plug, glue it back together again, or what I can do is basically cut the frame here and here, cut the exhaust, and stretch it. And then I won't worry too much about the drive shaft, because all I have to do is put a small gap or a small plug in there. I think that's what I'm going to do. It's the simplest solution, and it should get the back wheels located underneath those fenders like they should be. So I've removed the rear axle because it's only going to get in the way. And I have this piece of wood here just so that I'm not crushing the engine or anything like that while I'm trying to do the cutting. What I'm going to try to do is just do a nice straight cut straight down, and that'll make reattaching it after I stretch it all the more easy. Had hoped to catch that on camera, but I needed to brace a piece of wood a little bit better, but we've amputated the front and the back parts of the frame. Now I got to stretch them. So I've scraped the paint away from the frame ends that I'm going to be stretching here. And to do the actual join and stretch, I have this L-shaped plastic, and it was the same size all the way along on both legs, but I trimmed it down so that it fits the profile of the frame a little bit more. Okay, I've spliced the frame. Now I just put a little piece of round styrene in there to connect the drive shaft, and you can see just how small a stretch was required. Not very long at all. And there we are. The chassis is under the floor pan. And I think that looks a whole lot better than it did. It's amazing what a small stretch of the wheelbase made such a huge difference. As I mentioned earlier, I've been thinning the fenders, and I finally got the front fenders thinned out. And this is pretty much ready to go over to the paint booth to have a nice coat of shiny black paint put on it. But before I do that, I'm going to use it just basically to mock up and glue together the body. Now the body is not going to be painted black, because the first year that they offered a from the factory pickup truck, they actually offered one choice of colors. You could either have your entire truck black, or you can have it green and black. So the body portion is going to be green. I am glad I decided to hold off on sending this to the paint booth until I get the cab put together, because it's definitely the Classic T's turn to be the problem child this week. Originally, if you look on here, you can see there's this nice lovely ridge. Let's just focus in on that. Nice ridge right there, which looks an awful lot like the front of the seat should engage there. And when you're first mocking it up, when you put that seat there and the back wall of the cab in and everything, the bed of the truck, these mounting pins line up perfectly. Everything lines up just exactly as you want it. Okay? Although the instructions do tell you to cut these pins off. And when they wrote the instructions, they must have known there was something wrong. The front end, the cowl, it really needs to mount hard up against the front here. Otherwise, it's going to interfere with the engine. Well, once you put everything together, and the cowl ends up where it should be, when we look inside, you can see that that line that looks like the seat should be engaging on, there's no way that's going to make it. If you shove it forward, then you've got a huge gap, and your firewall is too far forward. So that must be why the instructions basically tell you, yeah, these pins we molded on here to engage on the back of the floor pan, yeah, get rid of those, because you're not going to be able to use them. But other than that, the cab did go together fairly well. I'm fairly satisfied with that. And if we look inside, might be tough to see, but I scribed a line as I try. Obviously, I put some work into this that you'll never be able to see. I scribed a line on the inside of the cab just so that the door is represented on the inside. So a little bit more cleaning up and touch up on this, and this will be ready for some green paint. Now, the fit of the roof is not good, but it's not terrible either. Mainly, you can see there's a gap here at the top of the windshield, and then there's a gap running all the way along at the back. Now, I can either sand the curved piece on both sides until it sits down flat, or I can put some flat pieces of styrene in here and then sand it down once I've got it built up. And I'm thinking to sand that perfectly without screwing up the fit on the sides, it might be easier just to simply pack this area out in this area for a better fit. Another minor annoyance of the Classic T pickup is the bed itself. Now it has these ribs molded on the outside, which is fine, which looks good. But if we look on the inside, there are these ribs that almost look like an after effect of molding the ribs on the outside. So I'm going to sand those down. They just don't look right. They're not very distinctly molded, so I'm thinking they should not be there. Let's get rid of those. All right, there's the inside of the bed. Cleaned up, smoothed out. I think this part, once I glue the tailgate on and of course get rid of these offending pins, this part will be ready for paint. Oops, and surprise, surprise, the tailgate needs some cleaning up too here on the inside. And here's the cab with filler on the back, ready for sanding. One final cleanup before this goes off to paint. There were 2 nasty ejector pin marks down here. And I know nobody's ever going to see them, but I'll know they're there. Took care of those. And in gleaming black, we have the fenders and the floorboards. Now, I will come back later and paint this area kind of a grayish rubbery color here, because I think that's a little too shiny. And I might paint these floorboards here a wooden color, although I would think they would probably have a coat of paint, seeing as they're exposed to the elements on the underside of the car. I got off lucky with this. I was going to use some Testors gloss black, and then I discovered a can of Testors spray can. And I thought, I'll just use that. Well, there was just barely enough pressure to paint this, and I'm lucky it turned out as well as it did. So I took a shortcut and I got away with it. Well, that just about does it for Dan's Model Works for this week. And I have worked on the hot rod, not that I showed it much. The main thing I did is I put the fender supports in. You can see them right here. Unfortunately, they need to be modified, because otherwise the fenders only kind of cover half of the wheels. So that's probably one of the reasons that I didn't show it on camera. And the classic T looks more together here than it really is. In fact, body is ready for paint, as is the bed. And I could try to get these things painted before wrapping up this video, but it's Sunday morning. I'd like to wrap this up and get it posted, and it's not like we're going to finish it this week anyway. So until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling.